welcome to our ongoing series on the glories of Sri Vrindavan Dham. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pacharine, Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschatadi Shatarne. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, today we will continue with our little series on the glories of that holy place, Yavat. Srila Narottam Das Thakur sings in Song 12 of Prarthana, O Lord Hari, will this ever happen to me, that in the village of King Brishabhanu, I will take birth as a gopi in the house of Ahira Gopala? Living in Yavat, I will serve the lotus feet of the intimate friend of Radha. Being merciful to me, she will engage me in serving Radha and Krishna. By attaining the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna, my life will be successful and all my desires will be fulfilled. So, for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, this is the highest goal, to become a maidservant of Srimati Radharani, who is engaged in pastimes of Padakya Rasa, or unwedded love with Krishna. We touched on this the other day. Radha and Krishna are engaged in many loving affairs, but they're not married. What's more, Radharani is married to Abhimanyu. So, to non-devotees, it may appear immoral, but it's not. And devotees are quick to defend Radha and Krishna in this regard. And what's more, actually glorify such loving pastimes. There's a very beautiful verse, Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 33rd chapter, text 39. Bhaktim padam bhagavati prati labhya kamam hrid horogam ashvapa hinod yachimena dira. Quote, anyone who faithfully hears or describes the Lord's playful affairs with the young gopis of Vrindavan will attain the Lord's pure devotional service. Thus he will quickly become sober and conquer lust, the disease of the heart. Actually, not only is Sri Radha married to Abhimanyu, but all her girlfriends are also married to their husbands. So the essential question is, if all these girls are married, how can Krishna intimately associate with them? Well, as we mentioned the other day, Krishna is the source of everyone and everything. Aham sarvasya prabhavo. Everyone and everything ultimately belongs to Krishna, as described in Bhagavad Gita. In the absolute sense, then no one is my wife, no one is my husband, no one is my child. Therefore, no one can fault Krishna for his dealings with the gopis, because they are his very own, as are we. Srila Prabhupada writes in a purport in Srimad Bhagavatam 5:18-19, quote, factually, the only real husband of all women is Krishna, the supreme husband. Because the gopis were liberated souls, they understood this fact. Therefore, they rejected their material husbands and accepted Krishna as their real husband. Srila Prabhupada's words. The fact that the gopis even have husbands in Vrindavan Leela is really just to make their meeting with Krishna more intense and more relishable. Now, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he offers a very interesting perspective in this regard. He writes that the gopis always desired to have Krishna as their husband, and they prayed to goddess Katyayani, an expansion of Durga Devi, for an entire month in this regard. Their prayer is actually very famous amongst Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Katyayani Mahamaye Mahayogini Adishvara Nanda Gopa Shutam Devi Pati Me Kuru Te Namaha. Quote, O Goddess Katyayani, O great potency of the Lord, O possessor of great mystic power, and the mighty controller of all, please make the son of Nanda Maharaj my husband. Now it's interesting, Srila Rupa Goswami writes that the gopis would add to that prayer, Dearest Katyayani, our connection with the son of Maharaj Nanda, Krishna, should be immediately arranged by you, not by our parents. Dearest Katyayani, our connection with the son of Maharaj Nanda, Krishna, should be immediately arranged by you, not by our parents. And Katyayani would reply, according to Srila Rupa Goswami, why? And the gopis would say, because we're extremely anxious and we cannot wait any longer. Now, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he adds that the gopis were not actually worshipping Mahamaya Durga. He says rather they were worshipping Yogamaya. He writes, quote, this is very clear because the gopis are all very exalted devotees of the Lord and would never have contact with the material energy. So finally at the end of the month, Goddess Katyayani reciprocated with the gopis by appearing in each of their minds and saying, quote, my dear Braja Gopi, very soon you will achieve Krishna's association. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he goes on to explain that during that 1 year in which Lord Brahma stole away all the cowherd boys, Krishna expanded himself as the cows and the cowherd boys. And during that year, all the gopis' parents arranged to marry their daughters to those cowherd boys. So essentially, all the gopis were actually married with Krishna. And even Radharani's husband, Abhimanyu, he's described as the shadow of Krishna. So it's a very deep subject matter, of course, these amorous pastimes, but they have to be discussed. The Leela has to be there, and the tattva, the philosophy behind the Leela, must also be discussed. If only because there needs to be a concept of loving God beyond just being a servant of God. Of course, everyone must begin, as we are, with the understanding that we are all eternal servants of God. We quoted this following verse several classes ago. Jivera Srupaya Krishnera Nityadas Krishnera Tatasta Shakti Beta Beta Prakash. From Chaitanya Charitamrita. Quote, it is the living entity's constitutional position to be an eternal servant of Krishna, because he is the marginal energy of Krishna, and a manifestation simultaneously one with and different from the Lord, unquote. And one can remain forever as servant of the Lord in Vaikuntha, because that is the mood there, Aishwarya Bhav, everyone is seeing themselves as servants of Lord Narayan, and that's fine. However, we also understand that the nature of love is that it's always increasing. Imperfectly in this world, but perfectly in the spiritual world. But we can understand love is always increasing. It's maturing, is a better word. And as such, the relationship of servant of God can mature into friendship with God. Or one can have the mood of parental love for God, as do Jasoda and Nanda Maharaj. Or one can enter into a more intimate relationship with God, like conjugal love, amorous pastimes. And although most religions are based solely on the servant-master relationship with God, there are hints in some of those religions of a deeper type of love for God. For example, in the Holy Bible, in Isaiah 54:5, Isaiah 54:5, we hear, quote, "For your Maker is your husband. The Lord Almighty is his name. The Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer. He is called the God of all earth." The God of all the earth. So the first part is significant there in that quote from the Bible. For your Maker is your husband. But other than that, there's no indication of a more intimate loving relationship with God in the Bible that I could find, or other major religions as far as I know. But there's so much information in our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, so much, in abundance. And for every philosophy, we require an example. And we know the best example of love of God, of Krishna, is Sri Radha. Anaya radito nunam, Bhagavan Harir Ishvara, Yanno Vihaya Govinda, Pritoyam Anayad Raha. Anaya radito nunam, Bhagavan Harir Ishvara, Yanno Vihaya Govinda, Pritoyam Anayad Raha. That's such an essential verse in our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. From Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 20, text number 38. Certainly this particular gopi has perfectly worshipped the all-powerful personality of Godhead, Govinda, since he was so pleased with her that he abandoned the rest of us and brought her to a secluded place. This verse is spoken by the Gopis, referring to Sri Radha. Ana ya radito nunam. Her name, Radha, comes from that particular phrase, Ana ya radito, or that phrase, Ana ya radito. Certainly this particular gopi has perfectly worshipped the all-powerful personality of Godhead Govinda, since he was so pleased with her that he abandoned the rest of us and brought her to a secluded place. This shows the special nature of Vrindavan Ishwari, Srimati Radharani, amongst all the other gopis. She is supreme. Often in my travels, people ask me, who's the girl with Krishna? Maybe you also have been asked that question. Who's the girl with Krishna? And my answer is always that she's the Lord's eternal consort. She is his most beloved. But technically, we as devotees know that she, Vrindavaneshwari, Srimati Radharani, is an expansion of Krishna's pleasure potency. That's called Ladini Shakti. God expands himself to enjoy. It makes sense because no one likes to enjoy alone. When we think of enjoying, we think of 1, 2, 3, or more of our friends. So for his supreme enjoyment, Krishna expanded as Srimati Radharani. Ladini Shakti, his pleasure potency, personified, became Srimati Radharani. And in the Brahma Vaivarta Purana, it's described that one day Krishna and Balaram were sitting together. And Krishna said, "My dear Balaram, you know, one day I took my flute and standing under a very beautiful kadamba tree in my threefold bending form, I saw my own reflection displayed on a golden platform decorated with jewels. Being enchanted by my own reflection, my heart filled with bliss. The nature of that bliss was divine love, capable of charming the entire world. And from that bliss manifested a goddess from my left side." And from that bliss manifested a goddess from my left side. And that goddess, supreme goddess, of course, was Srimati Radharani. Of course, Radha and Krishna are eternal, as all of us are, but this is the Leela of her appearance. And as the Lord's form is completely spiritual, being eternal, full of knowledge and bliss, so is Srimati Radharani's spiritual form, eternal, full of knowledge and bliss. There's nothing material about either of their forms. Therefore, there's no question of any material lust in their relationship. And the same holds true for all of Sri Radha's Gopi girlfriends, because actually her intimate friends are all expansions of herself. Thus, Krishna's relationship with the Gopis and the Gopis' relationships with Krishna are all pure and transcendental. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, we also hear, Atmen Duriya Priti Vansha Tari Bhali Kama Krishnan Duriya Priti Icha Dari Prema Nama. Quote, the desire to gratify one's own senses is kama, lust, but the desire to please the senses of Lord Krishna is prema, love. So therefore, real love, true love, means when one gives one's heart solely to Krishna. Twayime nanyavishaya matir manopate shukrit ratim udva hatad adha gangavogam udanvati. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.8.42. Really famous prayer. Really the essence of love, divine love for the Lord. O Lord of Madhu, as the Ganges forever flows to the sea without hindrance, let my attraction be constantly drawn unto you without being diverted to anyone else. From the heart of Kunti Devi. So, if Sri Radha's intimate Gopi girlfriends are expansion of herself, how then can we say as Gaudiya Vaishnavas that we can aspire to become Gopis? Because if Radha's girlfriend, her Gopi girlfriends are expansions of herself, then how do we as jivas become Gopis? Well, it can be answered by the fact that a foundation of our philosophy is that we are servants of the servants of the servants of the servants of the Gopis. There's that famous verse, Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 1380. I'm not a Brahmana, I'm not a Kshatriya, I'm not a Vaishya or a Sudra, nor am I a brahmachari, a householder, a vanapasta, or a sannyasi. I identify myself only as the servant of the servant of the servant of the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna, the maintainer of the Gopis. In other words, we aspire to become servants of Radha and Krishna's Gopis. Or more specifically, as a manjari or an associate of some Gopi. That's also Gopi, but not a main Gopi, let's put it like that. Not a main Gopi. We become manjaris or an associate of some Gopi. And Narottam Das Thakur makes that very clear. In the opening verse, one of the opening verses in which we quoted today. Listen very carefully. Quote, living in Yavat, he says, I will serve the lotus feet of an intimate friend of Radha, of an intimate friend of Radha. Being merciful to me, she will engage me in serving Radha and Krishna. So yes, we aspire to be Gopis, but of the nature of serving these very intimate servants of Radha and Krishna, like that. Of course, the beauty of Vrindavan is the variety of loving relationships. So there's cowherd boys, there's cows, there's deers, there's even liberated souls who themselves are very happy to be trees in Sri Vrindavan Dham. We discussed that several months ago. So the variety is there. And Gaudiya Vaishnavas may also one day in their Siddha Swarup serve the Lord of Vrindavan in that way. But all the rasas in Vrindavan are meant to facilitate the loving exchanges between Radha and Krishna. That's the essence. And as we learned 2 weeks ago, everyone is subservient to Sri Radha as the Queen of Vrindavan, even Krishna. But it's interesting that although Sri Radha herself, I was thinking like this, grows up in one majestic palace, Varshana, and later stays in another, Yavat, she prefers to reside in Braja's forest groves, tended by Vrinda, or the caves that Govardhan Hill provides for her and Krishna. Obviously, she feels this way because she meets Krishna in these places, not in the palaces of Varshana or Yavat, but she meets Krishna in the Vana, in the forest. She's also a very simple hearted cowherd girl. Yes, she's queen, but she's also a very simple-hearted cowherd girl who values the gifts of nature more than the opulences afforded by royal wealth. Sri Radha is the original Shri, the goddess of fortune. Lakshmi is actually an expansion from her. So she's Shri, she is the original supreme goddess of fortune. And she distributes untold riches to those who worship her. Yet she personally rejoices in the natural beauty of Braja's hills, waters, gardens, and creatures. Just like her beloved Krishna. You remember many months ago we were quoting a particular verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 10:24-24. Na na puro jana pada na grama na griha vayam. Varokshashash tata nityam vanashaila nivashina. Krishna speaking to his father. My dear father, our home is not in the cities or towns or villages. Being forest dwellers, we always live in the forest and on the hills. So she's just like Krishna, the divine couple, the two of them. One devotee has written, I read the other day, as queen of Braja's 6 seasons, Srimati Radharani expands the influence of her sweetness and opulence so that Vrindavan's soil, topography, foliage, and creatures put Vaikuntha's heavenly luxuries to shame. I thought that was nice. Srimati Radharani expands the influence of her sweetness and opulence so that Vrindavan's soil, topography, foliage, and creatures put Vaikuntha's heavenly luxuries to shame. And devotees sometimes wonder why Vrindavan has a structured hierarchy of like groups amongst Krishna's friends and gopis and cows, parrots, groves, and garden styles. There's a structured hierarchy we see in Vrindavan. And the acharyas say that this organization is attributed partly to Sri Radha, who is also called Astapriya. Beautiful name. Astapriya, meaning, quote, one who likes things arranged in groups of 8. Astapriya. One who likes things arranged in groups of 8. Sri Radha has 8 very dear friends known as the Sakis, each of whom has 8 dear friends of their own, Gopis, and then they have 8 assistants, and then they have 8 assistants, and they have 8 assistants. Like it goes down like that. So Ashtapriya, one who likes things arranged in groups of 8. Now, despite her pure, pristine nature, sometimes scandalous rumors about Sri Radha circulate in Vrindavan. Yes. Rumors accusing her of meeting with Krishna at different times of the day or night. We've discussed this. But our acharyas say that actually such rumors are the work of Krishna's pastime potency, coming from Yogamaya, personified as Mother Purnamasi. These rumors are the work of Krishna's pastime potency. Vrindavan wouldn't be what it is without these rumors, which always strive to enrich, how's it described? Enrich Radha and Krishna's leelas with obstacles they must overcome. The acharyas say, quote, without obstacles to cross over, the pleasure and freshness of Radha and Krishna's eventual meetings would be less flavorsome. So therefore there's many obstacles presented. And the rumors are some of those obstacles they have to overcome. What's even more interesting, I was reading, is that those acharyas say that, quote, whoever plays the role of making impediments in Radha and Krishna's pastimes is a very special servant of the Lord. Now you'll appreciate from the last two lectures about Yavat that Jatila and Kutila are two of the main personalities trying to stop Radha and Krishna's rendezvous. They're big obstacles. At one point I was reading, Jatila even went so far as to call her daughter-in-law, Sri Radha, Kula Kalinkini. Kula Kalinkini. Quote, it means the disgrace of her family. Kula Kalinkini, the disgrace of her family. And one consequence of Jatila's harsh criticism of Sri Radha in that way, funny as it may sound, is that she and Kutila think themselves to be the most qualified and chaste women in all of Vrindavan. So we're going to get into some Leela now. Some Tattva in the beginning and some Leela now. Both are essential. So one day, Krishna decided to silence all this criticism of Sri Radha's character that was going around. And at the same time, put Jatila and Kutila in their place. Radharani's mother-in-law and her daughter, Jatila's daughter, Kutila. Put them in their place. So what Krishna did is he approached Purnamasi, Yogamaya, and they came up with a really interesting plan as follows. So one morning, Mother Yashoda and Purnamasi went together to wake up Krishna, as usual, at least as Mother Yashoda used to do, but this time Mother Purnamasi was accompanying her. But that morning, Krishna barely stirred in response to their calls and their caresses. Instead, what he did is he pulled a blanket over his head and he moaned, "Maya, I feel so sick." So it said that those three words struck Mother Yashoda's heart like 3 bolts of lightning, and she was unable to move. So Mother Purnamasi, she felt Krishna's forehead, and taking his pulse, she announced, "Krishna has a fever. Krishna has a fever." So immediately Mother Yashoda turned to one of her maidservants, and with a voice full of anxiety, she said, "Call the royal physician at once, the doctor at once." So very soon, Krishna's bedroom was crowded with friends, his parents, well-wishers, the royal physician, and I was reading every other doctor from the villages around Vrindavan. They all came. And as the morning went on, each doctor's diagnosis was the same, high fever. But none of them could pinpoint the cause of Krishna's illness. As a result, Yasoda was in tears. Nanda Maharaj's face was lined with worry. And boys like Madhu Mangal were frozen silent by helplessness. And I read that even the birds crowding the windowsill, birds that usually sing for Krishna, they were silent, they were still. So after consulting amongst themselves, the doctors declared, quote, "Unless this fever can be brought down, regardless of whether it was caused by poison, spells, or disease, we fear that Krishna will not survive." So in the silence of the moments following that declaration by the doctors, Purnamasi stepped forward as part of her plan, her and Krishna's plan, and she said, "I know mantras that will cure Krishna." And at that point, all the Brajabasis crowded around her to hear the cure. So she said, "Even if Krishna is suffering from a sorcerer's curse, my austerities will save him. However, the presiding deity of my mantras is the sun god. My mantras will only be effective with his blessings and the blessings of his daughter, the Jamuna River, Yamuna Mai, and the blessings of his daughter, the Jamuna River. And his blessings, the sun god's blessings, will come through that water that I must sanctify with mantras and then rub over Krishna's body. I will know that the sun god has blessed me if a perfectly chaste married woman brings Jamuna Jal, Jamuna water, to me in a very special pot." So she said, "I'll know the sun god's, blessing me in this endeavor if a perfectly chaste married woman brings Jamuna water to me in a very special pot." So then turning to Nanda Maharaj, she said, "Bring me the most chaste woman in Braj." That was, part of the remedy. A chaste woman should bring this water, which she would bless with her mantras and rub all over Krishna's body to bring down that high fever. So bring me the most chaste woman in Braj. So since the news that Krishna was deathly ill had already drawn most of Vrindavan's residents to the palace, it's described Nanda Maharaj didn't have to go far in search of chaste ladies. But the acharyas say, because every woman in Vrindavan is chaste, who could say was the purest of the pure? So when Mother Yasoda consulted the elder ladies, everyone had their own opinion. No one could agree who was the purest, most chaste woman in Vrindavan. So when Mother Purnamasi finally came out of the palace, she was given a very long list of chaste women, all willing to bring Jamuna water for Krishna in a special pot. So then Purnamasi instructed Nandamukhi to bring this special pot. And then she announced, "Now let all pure women accompany me to the bank of the Jamuna." And then she set out on the path that led to the Jamuna with all these gopis, young and old, following her. And meanwhile, Krishna's close friends, the cowherd boys, they stayed behind to tend to Krishna, who was burning up with fever. So soon all, Purnamasi and all these gopis, they arrived at the bank of the Jamuna. Now Nandamukhi had gone ahead, and she was already waiting at that place with the special pot. Now just how special was this pot? Well, It was pure gold. It was a golden pot, but it had 100 holes in the pot. So you can imagine what a task this was going to be. So as Purnamasi lifted this golden pot with 100 holes in it in the air, she said, quote, "Ladies, you are all chaste wives, but only the purest amongst you can carry this pot without spilling a drop. Through that person, the sun god will bless my mantras." So to demonstrate this unique pot, Purnamasi dipped it into the Jamuna River, and when she lifted it up, as per her plan, water poured out of the holes in 100 tiny streams, it's described. In 100 tiny streams. Then holding the pot out, she asked, "So who will carry it?" But her question was met with nervous silence. I think that's the best way to explain it. Her question was met with nervous silence. And what happened next was that each lady, to avoid being embarrassed, volunteered someone else to put that pot in the river and carry it back. And those who were thus nominated, they deferred the honor to other ladies they insisted were more pure than themselves. So it went on like that. I think she's more pure. No, I think she's more pure. And then sure enough, the acharyas say, just as Purnamasi and Krishna had planned, when Jatila and Kutila were nominated, they accepted. Of all the women of Braj, only these two were vain enough and foolish enough to think that they were the purest, most chaste. Remember earlier we talked about how they did think of themselves like that. And Krishna wanted to put them in their place, Krishna and Purnamasi. So taking the golden pot, Kutila dipped it into the Jamuna with great confidence. As Sri Radha's Gopi friends were thinking, what a fool. Now she will learn a very well-deserved lesson. And sure enough, the golden pot spouted water the moment it was lifted above the Jamuna. But Kutila was so sure of herself that she thought those leaks would stop once the pot was on her head. But as she placed the pot on her head, water poured out in 100 different directions. And within moments, the pot was empty and Kutila was soaked. Now, the cowherd women present, I was reading, couldn't restrain their laughter. And humiliated, Kutila handed the pot to her mother, Jatila. She said, "Mother, no doubt you are the purest of the two of us." So at this point, Jatila couldn't resist the opportunity to demonstrate her supreme chastity. So she too dipped the pot into the Jamuna. And as expected, Jatila's efforts brought the same result. The water all leaked out. And soon both women, stood side by side, soaking wet and humiliated by their foolishness. So at that point, Purnamasi, Yogamaya, she addressed all the women of Braj. And I quote here, "O wise gopis, consult amongst yourselves and quickly tell me who is the purest, lest Maharaj Nanda's son perish as a result of your humility," unquote. So with that, Lalita Saki stepped forward and she declared, "Respected elder," speaking to Purnamasi, "there's no need for consultation, for we all know that King Brishabhana's daughter, Srimati Radharani, is the most chaste of all." And the reaction to this proposal, it's described, was mixed. The village gossipers shook their heads in disapproval, But those favorable to Sri Radha nodded their heads and approved Lalita Sakhi's words. So Mother Purnamasi handed Sri Radha this special golden pot and said, quote, "You are a high-born princess of spotless character. Won't you carry water for the welfare of Queen Yashoda's son? You are a high-born princess of spotless character. Won't you carry water for the welfare of Queen Yashoda's son?" So then Radha, lowering her face and looking shyly at Purnamasi's feet, replied, "Whatever you order, I will do. Whatever you order, I will do." Then Sri Radha slowly dipped this special golden pot with 100 holes into the Jamuna and lifted it out of the water. And as the Brajabasis looked on in wonder, she raised it onto her head, and not a single drop of water escaped from that 100 holes. The Acharya is right. Just as Krishna had once made the water of the Jamuna solid by the sound of his flute, he now kept water in the pot by the power of his will. It sparkled through the pot's holes, but it would not flow. For one magnificent moment, Sri Radha stood amidst the incredulous Brajabasis, her head held high, the golden pitcher glistening in the bright sun. She then followed Purnamasi back to Nandagram. Of all the women in Braj, Sri Radha was the most chaste. The other gopis were faithful to their husbands, but Sri Radha was faithful to Krishna, the ultimate husband and the maintainer of every living entity. Sri Radha transgressed conventional morality to serve Krishna, her eternal husband, in full pursuance of his order, Sarvadharmam Parichaja, abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. She had risked everything to serve Krishna, and true to his promise, Krishna personally protected her from all sinful reaction. Moreover, he arranged this pastime just to exalt her above all others. Unquote. Thus spoke the Acharyas. Beautiful commentary, isn't it, by our Acharyas? So, although the ladies' reactions to Lalita's proposal had been mixed, when Sri Radha carried the pot back to Nandagram, without spilling a drop, they all thought the same thing. The daughter of Kirtida is the most chaste. The daughter of Kirtida is the most chaste. And those who were fond of spreading rumors about Radha and Krishna, they all felt ashamed of themselves. And in their minds, they begged Radharani's forgiveness, especially for their nonsense. Because they were advertising all over Vrindavan that she was unchaste. So now in their minds, they begged her forgiveness for their nonsense. And then Sri Radha's friends crowded around her and clapped their hands, it's written, as they sang songs in praise of Krishna, their faces beaming with pride. For after so much hardship, Radha's name and reputation had been restored. Radha's name and reputation had been restored. Haribo, Jai Sri Radhe. And as this procession of gopis returned to Nandagram, their voices rose up to Krishna's quarters, bringing anxious Yashoda to the window. And I was reading as Mother Yashoda looked down, tears of happiness fell from her face as she thought, my son will live. My son will live. And when the entourage arrived at Krishna's bedroom, all the gopis piled in behind Purnamasi. And Purnamasi didn't waste a moment as she stood at the head of Krishna's bed and chanted mantras over the water and then gently spread it over Krishna's burning limbs. And as she did so, Yashoda comforted her son by saying, quote, "O Krishna, now that Braja's holy mother and the chaste daughter of King Vrindavan are here, you will be cured. Have no fear. O Krishna, now that Braja's holy mother and the chaste daughter of King Vrindavan are here, you will be cured. Have no fear." And the Acharyas say that upon hearing Srimati Radharani's name, Krishna opened his eyes. And before Purnamasi had finished her task, his fever, which was actually the fever of separation from Sri Radha, that's how it's written. What was his fever? His fever was actually the fever of separation from Sri Radha, began to subside. Then Purnamasi, she announced, "By the purity of Princess Radha, the blessings of the Sun God are with us. Without doubt, that eye of the world has empowered my mantras, which will cure this boy within just a short time." And as she said that, Krishna's fever disappeared completely because Radha was there. So then, how's it written? Then, while stealing glances at Sri Radha, who stood shyly in a corner, Krishna sat up and said to his mother, "Maya, I'm hungry." Krishna sat up and said to his mother, "Maya, I'm hungry." And these words brought cheers of Jai, Jai to everyone present. And as all the cowherd boys embraced Krishna, Yashoda turned to some of the girls and said, "Quickly take Sri Radha to the kitchen and prepare a feast to aid the recovery of my hungry son." And one acharya has written, "And what a feast it was." And what a feast it was. Now, outside the palace, news of Krishna's recovery and of Sri Radha's supreme chastity spread like wildfire throughout the village of Braj. People were saying, "The sun god has personally attested to Sri Radha's purity." Now, for some time thereafter, no one dared question Radha's comings and goings. Everyone was thinking, the sun god has personally attested to Sri Radha's purity. So for some time thereafter, no one dared question Radha's comings and goings. Her meetings with Krishna, it's described, were easier to arrange with little anxiety. But then the plot thickens, as it often does in Braj. Everything was going fairly easily until Purnamasi, Yogamaya, again exerted her power, her pastime potency. By her influence, the Brajabasis gradually forgot the incident of the golden pot with the 100 holes. And Jatila and Kutila and other villagers again became suspicious of Radha's frequent visits into the forest. And once again, obstacles were placed in the way of the divine couple's affections. But let us remember, obstacles that merely increased their desires, or their desire for each other, and the sweetness of their eventual meetings. Obstacles that merely increased their desires for each other and the sweetness of their eventual meetings. Hare Krishna. Shri Brajabhumi, Shri Vrindavan Dham ki, Shri Shivashram Sundar ki, Mother Purnamasi ki. So we will finish today with one verse from Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati's Vrindavan Mahimamrita. May the glorious young girl named Radha, expert in amorous arts within Vrindavan, who eclipses the fame of the material and spiritual worlds by her fresh rasa of prema, in a full ocean of soft golden beauty and charm, resting on the lap of young Krishna, remain victorious. Hare Krishna. Vrindavaneshwari Shrimati Radharani ki. Srila Prabhupada ki. So once again, Prabhus, thank you. This was pure bliss, the research, my humble delivery. That was all very wonderful, and thank you so much. And yeah, we've got some more pastimes for Yavat. I think maybe 2 or maybe even 3 more classes. So give me a couple days and I'll be back and share the nectar with all of you. Hare Krishna. Shri Shri Gauranitai ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Shama Sundar ki, Vrindavaneshwari Shrimati Radharani ki, Shri Shri Gauranitai ki, Mayapur Dhama ki, Gokul Vrindavan ki, Goloka Vrindavan Dhama ki, back home, back to Godhead ki, Go Premanandi, Jai Jai Sisi Radhe Shan. Hare Krishna. Jai Prabhupada. All right, well, see you soon.